Zolder stood quietly on the edge of the battlefield, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. He was a warrior, one of the most skilled in his alien race. But today, something caught his attention. The sun set low, casting a golden glow over the scene. But it was the human soldier in the middle of the chaos that drew his focus. Zolder had seen humans before, but never one like this. The human wore an unfamiliar suit, shiny and dark, with strange markings that seemed to glow faintly under the light. This armor wasn't like any weapon Zolder had seen before. It didn't just protect the human, it enhanced his strength, speed, and agility. The human moved like a blur, his powerful movements taking down enemy soldiers with ease. His armor pulsed with energy, creating an almost mystical aura around him. Zolder's mind raced as he watched the soldier dodge and strike. Each move was calculated, precise. Zolder had never seen anything like it. For the first time in his life, he felt something he wasn't used to, awe. He had been in countless battles, fought against some of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. But this human was something different. The way he moved, the way he seemed to be everywhere at once. It was as if the armor itself was an extension of him. It didn't just protect him, it transformed him. Zolder watched as the human swung his arm, knocking an enemy soldier off his feet with incredible force. The armor seemed to amplify his strength. There was no way Zolder could compete with that. Not without something of his own. The thought lingered in his mind. Could it be possible? Could this armor be the key to unlocking untold power? He had heard rumors about humans and their strange technology. But this was something beyond his understanding. Zolder's heart raced, but he didn't move. He knew better than to rush into a fight without thinking. Instead, he studied the human soldier more closely. He watched the way the armor shimmered as it absorbed energy from the environment, how it seemed to regenerate after each hit. It was almost as if the suit itself was alive, breathing, adapting. Zolder had never encountered such technology before, and the idea of getting his hands on it consumed his every thought. As the battle raged on, Zolder remained hidden, observing. His mind churned with ideas. The human was alone, surrounded by enemies, but still, he fought on without hesitation. It wasn't just the armor that made the human dangerous, it was his will, his determination. Zolder could see it in the way he moved. This was a warrior, not just a man wearing armor. But what if Zolder could wear it too? What if he could harness the power of the human armor? He could feel the weight of the possibility pressing on him. He had always been a warrior, but what if this armor could make him even more than that? What if it could make him unstoppable? His thoughts were interrupted when the human suddenly turned, catching sight of him in the distance. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Zolder saw something in the human's gaze, a glint of recognition, or perhaps suspicion. The human's eyes narrowed, but then, just as quickly, he turned back to the battle, as if he knew Zolder would not act on the thought of attacking him. Zolder exhaled slowly, his mind still racing. He had been spotted, but he had no intention of revealing himself just yet. He would wait. He would study the human more, learn more about the armor, and find a way to acquire it. The human soldier fought with fierce determination, but Zolder wasn't just watching him for his strength. No, Zolder was watching him to learn, to understand how this armor worked, how it could make someone so powerful. He could feel the weight of the decision building inside him. If he wanted to be the greatest warrior in the galaxy, he needed that armor, and nothing, not even the human strength or determination, was going to stop him from getting it. The sun was now dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The fight seemed to slow, the remaining soldiers retreating. The human, still standing tall, removed his helmet. For a brief moment, Zolder saw his face. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough. The human was no different from any other warrior, determined, focused, and ready for battle. But there was something in his eyes, a fire that burned with a sense of purpose that Zolder had not seen in any other being. Zolder felt a strange sense of respect for the human, but that respect quickly turned into a feeling he wasn't used to: envy. The human had something that Zolder wanted, something that would change the course of his life forever. The armor, the power, the advantage. Zolder couldn't help but wonder, could he outsmart the human? and take the armor for himself? Would the human be willing to share it, or would Zalther have to fight for it? As the battlefield fell silent, Zalther's thoughts continued to swirl. He knew he had to act quickly. The human's armor was too powerful to ignore, and Zalther would stop at nothing to claim it as his own. The battle may have been over for the day, but for Zalther, it was only just beginning. Zalther couldn't shake the image of the human soldier from his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing armor, the way it moved with the soldier, adapting to every punch, every strike. The more he thought about it, the more obsessed he became. He had faced many enemies in his time: warriors, beasts, entire fleets, but nothing had ever captivated him like this. The human had something Zalther needed, something that could make him more than just a skilled fighter. Over the next few days, Zalther remained hidden, tracking the human soldier from a distance. He followed him everywhere, through dense jungles, across barren plains, and into the heart of alien cities. Each time, the soldier wore that armor, and each time, Zalther found himself more intrigued. The armor wasn't just about strength, it was about control, about precision. The soldier never hesitated, never wavered. He was an extension of the armor, and the armor was an extension of him. Together, they were unstoppable. Zalther's thoughts turned dark. He had never been one for subtlety, but there was something different about the way this human carried himself. Zalther had seen countless beings, but none had the same calm confidence that the human had. It was as if the armor didn't just protect him, it elevated him, made him a symbol of invincibility. And Zalther, he had always been invincible, but this armor was different. If he had it, he could crush anyone, conquer anything. His enemies would fall before him, and no one would dare stand in his way. But how could he get it? The human wasn't stupid. He would never simply hand over his armor to an outsider, especially not someone like Zalther. The alien warrior could try to fight him, but he knew that would be foolish. The human had already shown that he was far superior in battle. For the next few weeks, Zalther spent his time studying the human's movements, waiting for the perfect opportunity. He observed the soldier's every action, learning the routines, the patterns, and the weaknesses. But there were none. The human never faltered. No matter how many times Zalther watched, he could find no flaws, no openings. The more Zalther thought about it, the more frustrated he became. He wanted that armor, wanted it so badly that it consumed his thoughts. It wasn't just about power anymore, it was about proving that he was the best, that no one, not even this human, could surpass him. The idea of the human's superiority gnawed at him. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't stand the thought of someone else having what he wanted. One night, Zalther finally decided to act. The human was resting in a small camp, the armor laid beside him, glowing faintly in the dark. Zalther knew it was now or never. He had studied enough to know how to disable the armor's defenses, at least temporarily, with stealth and precision. He crept into the camp, his movements silent as he approached the soldier. The human was asleep, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Zalther's heart raced as he reached out to touch the armor. It was warm to the touch, almost alive, as if it could sense him. He hesitated, but only for a moment. With a swift movement, he activated the locking mechanism that held the armor in place. The sound of the lock clicking open filled the air, and Zalther felt a rush of excitement. He was so close now, so close to claiming the power that he had been dreaming of. But as his hands touched the armor, something unexpected happened. A surge of energy shot through him, and he stumbled back. In shock, the armor, reacting to the disturbance, sprang to life. The human soldier stirred, his eyes snapping open, locking onto Zalther in an instant. The warrior froze, the realization of his mistake sinking in. He had been caught. "You think you can take it?" the human asked, his voice calm, almost mocking. Zalther could see the faintest hint of a smile on his face, but it wasn't one of fear. No, it was the smile of someone who had already won. "You think you can just steal it and walk away?" Zalther felt a chill run down his spine. The armor, now fully activated, moved on its own, surrounding the human with an aura of power. The human didn't need to do anything. The armor did it all, and in that moment, Zalther realized just how far out of his depth he was. This wasn't just a piece of technology, it was something far more advanced. It was a bond between the soldier and the armor, something that couldn't be replicated, something that Zolder would never understand. For the first time in his life, Zolder felt helpless. The human soldier stood, now fully armored, and walked toward him. There was no aggression, no anger in his movements. It was as if he knew exactly what would happen next. Zolder stood his ground, trying to hide his unease behind a facade of confidence. "You're not ready for this," the human said. "You want this armor. You'll have to earn it. No one gets it by force." Zolder's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan, trying to think of a way to defeat the soldier and claim the armor. But the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The human wasn't just a warrior. He was a protector, someone who understood the true power of the armor. It wasn't just about strength, it was about purpose. Zolder took a step back, finally acknowledging the truth. He didn't want the armor for the right reasons. He wanted it for pride, for glory, and that, he realized, would never be enough. He needed to change. He needed to understand what the armor truly represented before he could claim it for himself. The human stood still, watching him, waiting for Zolder to make his move. But Zolder knew one thing for sure now: the battle for the armor wasn't over, it had only just begun. And if he truly wanted to wear it, he would have to change. He would have to prove himself worthy. With a final glance at the human soldier, Zolder turned and walked away, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. The armor wasn't just about power, it was about understanding. And Zolder knew that if he wanted it, he would have to learn what it truly meant to be worthy of it. Zolder could hardly sleep that night. The human soldier's words echoed in his mind. "You'll have to earn it." What did that mean? Earn it? Zolder had always believed that strength, power, and victory were the only things that mattered. He had taken countless worlds, defeated untold enemies, and proven himself in every battle. Yet here was this human, telling him that the armor was not just about physical strength. It was something more. Zolder couldn't ignore the challenge. The next morning, he made his decision. He wasn't going to steal the armor. He would earn it. But how? He had never considered this before. In all his years as a warrior, he had never had to earn something in the way the human described. It was always about overpowering, dominating, and taking what he wanted. But now everything had changed. The armor was not just a weapon, it was a symbol, something deeper than he could have imagined. For the first time in his life, Zolder found himself questioning his own values. What did earning something truly mean? Was it about humility? Was it about sacrifice? These were concepts Zolder had never considered. He had been raised to believe that might made right, that the strongest took what they wanted, and everyone else followed. But the human soldier, with his calm, unwavering presence, had shown Zolder that perhaps there was more to power than he had ever realized. Zolder decided that he would seek out the human. He needed to understand. He had to learn more about the strange armor, but he also needed to learn more about the soldier who wore it. It wasn't enough just to defeat him in battle or steal the armor. If he truly wanted it, he needed to understand its purpose. He needed to see things differently. He followed the human for days, through dense forests and barren deserts, always staying just out of sight. Zolder was patient, watching, observing. The human soldier, though skilled, seemed to be on some kind of mission. He wasn't fighting for glory or fame, but for something else. There was purpose in every step he took, a drive that Zolder couldn't quite grasp. Finally, one night, after a long day's travel, the human set up camp alone. Zolder knew this was his chance. He approached cautiously, staying hidden in the shadows, watching as the soldier took off his helmet and relaxed by the fire. There was no sense of arrogance in his demeanor, no prideful display of strength. Just a soldier at peace, taking a moment to breathe. Zolder stepped forward, revealing himself slowly, making sure the soldier could see him approach. The human didn't flinch. He simply watched, his eyes calm and steady. The alien warrior felt a strange sense of discomfort. This human, this mere mortal, seemed to radiate a calm that Zolder could not shake. "You came," the soldier said, his voice a low, almost amused tone. "I knew you would." Zolder felt a surge of anger, but he kept it in check. I came to challenge you again, he said, trying to sound confident. I want the armor. The human smiled slightly, but his gaze didn't waver. You think you can just take it? You've learned nothing, Zalder. If you want it, you have to prove you're worthy. Not just in battle, but in understanding. Zalder was silent for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. Worthy? He asked. What do you mean by that? The soldier gestured to the armor resting beside him. It's not just about strength, Zalder. It's about purpose. It's about protecting what matters, not just conquering. You think that by taking the armor, you'll be invincible, but you're wrong. Strength without purpose is hollow. Zalder felt a knot tighten in his chest. The words struck him deeply. In a place he didn't want to acknowledge, for the first time, he felt small. He had always been taught that power was the only thing that mattered, but here was this human, with his simple words, shattering everything Zalder had believed. I don't need a lesson, Zalder said, though his voice was strained, uncertain. I just need to be stronger. The human shook his head. Strength without understanding is a danger to everyone. You're a warrior, Zalder, but you don't understand what it means to protect. This armor isn't just a weapon. It's a tool for a purpose. If you truly want it, you have to learn why it was made. Zalder was silent again, his mind racing. How do I learn? How do I prove I'm worthy? The soldier stood, his expression serious. You can start by helping others, by understanding what it means to protect, not just to destroy. When you stop fighting for yourself and start fighting for something bigger, then you'll understand. The armor can't give you that, but it can help you become the protector you need to be. Zalder felt something shift inside him. It was a strange sensation, like a weight lifting off his shoulders, though he didn't fully understand it. He had been fighting for power his entire life, but here was a human, a soldier who had faced unimaginable dangers, and he wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting for something more important, to protect. Zalder's eyes narrowed as he considered the soldier's words. Could it really be that simple? Could his life have meaning beyond the battlefield? For the first time, Zalder questioned everything he had ever known. The human's voice broke through his thoughts. You can come with me, he said. If you want to learn, I'll teach you. But you have to do it with an open heart. You can't just take. You have to give. Zalder stood still for a moment, then finally spoke. I'll do it. I'll learn. But only because I need to understand. The human smiled, his expression warm. Then you're ready. As they stood there by the fire, Zalder felt something new stir inside him. It wasn't the hunger for power or domination, but a quiet sense of purpose. He had taken the first step toward becoming something more than a warrior, and it scared him. But it also filled him with hope. The journey ahead would be difficult, and he didn't know if he was truly ready. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to stop until he understood what it meant to protect. Zalder had made his choice, and in that moment, he knew the path ahead would change him forever. The next day, Zalder followed the human soldier deeper into the unknown territory. The path they took was harsh and unforgiving rocky mountains, dense forests, and uncharted lands that Zalder had never ventured into before. It wasn't just the environment that was foreign to him, but the pace of their journey. The human moved with a steady, unhurried pace, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, always alert but never frantic. Zalder, on the other hand, was used to charging ahead with force, to fight his way through any obstacle. But here, he had to learn to slow down. As they traveled, the human soldier spoke little, but his presence seemed to command Zalder's attention. It wasn't the way he moved or the armor he wore. It was something deeper, something more elusive. The soldier's calm demeanor, his way of simply being in the moment, made Zalder uneasy. The warrior in him wanted to push forward, to find an enemy to fight, a reason to unleash his power. But the soldier kept walking, quietly and with purpose, leading Zalder into unfamiliar territory, both physically and mentally. It wasn't long before they reached a small village, nestled at the foot of a mountain range. The people here were unlike any Zalder had ever encountered. They didn't look like warriors, nor did they seem to possess the kind of power Zalder was accustomed to. They were farmers, healers, and craftsmen, ordinary people living simple lives. Zalder was shocked by their peaceful existence, There were no soldiers, no armories, no weapons in sight, just families working together, children playing in the fields, and elders offering wisdom. The human soldier, without a word, walked toward the center of the village, where a group of villagers gathered around an elderly man. They seemed to be in the middle of a discussion, but as the soldier approached, everything grew silent. The villagers turned their eyes to him, but there was no fear, no awe. They greeted him with warmth, even respect. Zolder felt a strange sense of discomfort as he watched them, unsure of what to make of the scene. One of the villagers, an older woman with a cane, stepped forward and addressed the soldier. "You've returned, and who is this with you?" The human soldier looked at Zolder and then back at the villagers. "This is Zolder," he said simply. "He is learning." The villagers exchanged curious glances, but said nothing more. The elderly man, who had been silent until now, gestured for Zolder to come closer. "You're not from here," he said with a knowing smile. "What brings you to this place?" Zolder hesitated, still unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to being in the presence of people who didn't fear him, people who didn't see him as a warrior or a conqueror. These villagers had no reason to be intimidated by him, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. But he answered anyway, his voice steady, if not a little unsure. "I'm here to learn." The elderly man's eyes twinkled. "Learn from who?" The human soldier nodded towards Zolder. "From him, from all of you." Zolder looked down at the elderly man, who had an air of calm wisdom about him. The old man studied him with eyes that seemed to see through the armor of arrogance. "Zolder, war, then come," he said, turning and gesturing for Zolder to follow him. "You will learn more than you think." The elderly man led Zolder to a small stone hut on the edge of the village, where a fire burned low and the smell of herbs filled the air. The man began preparing something, placing leaves and roots into a small bowl. Zolder watched him, still unsure of the purpose of this strange ritual. "You think you're a warrior," the elderly man said as he worked, "but you've only ever known war. You've never known peace. You've never known the weight of healing, the responsibility of protecting without harm. That is what you must learn." Zolder stiffened, the words cutting deeper than he expected. He had been a warrior his whole life, trained for battle and survival, but he had never been asked to protect in this way, to heal, to care for others. Without the threat of violence hanging over him, his mind raced, the idea foreign and uncomfortable. "You think the armor will make you stronger," the elderly man continued, "but true strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to show compassion. You have strength, but you lack wisdom. The armor won't teach you that, only experience." Will Zolder felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had always believed that strength was the key to everything, that to conquer was to win, and to win was the only way to survive. But now, in this small village, surrounded by people who had no interest in conquest or battle, he was starting to see things differently. The human soldier stood quietly by the door, watching as Zolder listened to the old man. "You're starting to understand," the soldier said softly, his voice steady. "This isn't about the armor. It's about what you do with it." The old man finally finished his work and handed the bowl to Zolder. "Take this," he said, "and learn." Zolder took the bowl cautiously, unsure of what to do with it. The elderly man smiled kindly, as though he knew the warrior's doubts. "Strength isn't just in taking life, it's in giving it back, in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Zolder's hands trembled slightly as he held the bowl. For the first time in his life, he wasn't holding a weapon, wasn't preparing to fight. He was holding something fragile, something that could be used to heal rather than destroy. It felt alien to him, unfamiliar, and yet it resonated with something deep within him, a part of him that had never been awakened before. As he stood there holding the bowl in his hands, Zolder realized that his journey was far from over. The path to understanding was only beginning, and it would not be easy. But as he looked at the human soldier who had led him here, and then back at the elderly man, Zolder understood one thing: the true power of the armor was not in its strength, it was in its ability to protect, and he had a lot to learn before he could ever claim it. He looked back at the soldier, a sense of clarity beginning to form in his mind. "I'm ready," he said quietly. his voice full of determination. The soldier nodded, knowing that Zolther had taken his first real step toward becoming more than just a warrior. Zolther's journey through the village had changed him more than he cared to admit. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just thinking about how to defeat the next enemy or claim the next victory. He was starting to understand something far more important: the weight of what it meant to truly protect. But the lessons were not easy to swallow, and Zolther struggled with every step of it. The sense of power he had once craved seemed small now compared to the idea of responsibility. The morning after he had spent time with the villagers, Zolther stood alone at the edge of the village, looking out at the rolling hills and the distant peaks of the mountains. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Zolther's gaze was distant, his mind wrestling with the new thoughts that had taken root. Could he really change? Could he let go of the warrior's mindset that had shaped his entire existence? The human soldier walked up beside him, his presence calm but steady. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" the soldier said, his voice quiet. Zolther didn't answer at first. The question was too loaded, and he wasn't ready to admit how much of a struggle it was. "I'm trying to understand," he said finally, his voice thick with frustration. "I've always been taught that strength is what matters. That's how I've lived my whole life. But now, I'm starting to see that it's not just about power, but it feels unnatural to think of things differently." The soldier nodded, watching the sun rise higher in the sky. "It's not unnatural, Zolther. It's just something you've never been taught. Strength can protect, but it can also destroy. You've learned that power doesn't always lead to victory. You've seen that there are other ways to fight." Zolther's eyes narrowed as he stared at the distant horizon. "I don't know if I can be the protector you're asking me to be. I don't know how to protect without fighting, without winning." The soldier let out a small sigh, stepping closer. "You can start by asking yourself why you fight in the first place. Is it to win? Or is it to make sure others don't have to suffer?" The words hit Zolther harder than he expected. The idea of fighting for someone else, for something more than just personal glory, was a concept he had never truly understood. He had always fought because it was what he was born to do. But now, standing on the edge of this village, surrounded by peaceful people who had never known the kind of violence Zolther had faced, he felt the weight of what it meant to fight for a cause, not just for himself. "Why do you fight?" Zolther asked, his voice softer than before. The soldier paused, considering the question before answering. "I fight because I believe in something bigger than myself. I fight because I want to protect people. I want to keep them safe from the things that would hurt them. I fight because I believe that life is worth defending." Zolther's chest tightened. These weren't just words. There was something in the soldier's voice, something that made the warrior in Zolther pause. The soldier wasn't talking about winning. He wasn't talking about glory. He was talking about a cause, something beyond the battle itself. Zolther had never fought for something bigger than himself, and it left him feeling empty. For days, Zolther stayed in the village, continuing to learn from the human soldier and the villagers. He worked alongside them, helping to repair homes, gather food, and even tend to the sick. It was exhausting work, and Zolther was not used to it. But with each task, he felt a small shift in himself. It wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about making a difference in the lives of others. Every act, no matter how small, was another step toward becoming the protector the soldiers spoke of. But the old instincts, the ones that told him to conquer, to take, were still there. Zolther couldn't shake the feeling that he was not meant to be this kind of person. He was meant to be a warrior, a conqueror. The weight of that identity clung to him, and the desire to prove his worth through strength remained a constant pull. One evening, as they sat around the fire, the human soldier turned to Zolther with a serious look in his eyes. "You've come a long way, Zolther, but there's still something you're not seeing. You think you're not worthy of the armor, that it's something you have to earn. But the truth is, the armor already belongs to you. It's not about proving your worth. It's about accepting who you are and learning how to use your strength for something good." Zolther felt the words sink in. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and yet, he still felt torn. He wanted the armor, but more than that, he wanted the power to make things right. The desire to protect was growing stronger, but it didn't come without its own struggles. The next morning, Zolder stood once again at the edge of the village, looking out over the land. The soldiers in his mind called to him, urging him to return to the way he had always known. But as he stood there, a sense of peace began to fill him. It wasn't the peace of victory, but the peace of purpose. The armor was not just a tool for domination, it was a tool for protection. Zolder had spent his life seeking power, but now, for the first time, he understood what it meant to wield it for a greater cause. As the sun rose higher, Zolder made a decision. He would never be the same warrior he had once been. The armor would no longer be a symbol of conquest for him. It would be a symbol of protection, of the strength to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. He turned to face the human soldier, who was watching him from a distance. "I'm ready," Zolder said, his voice steady. "I understand now. I understand what it means to protect." The soldier smiled, his face full of quiet pride. "Then let's begin." And so, Zolder began his journey again, this time not as a conqueror, but as a protector. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges he had never faced before, but Zolder felt something inside him shift. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something bigger than himself, and that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were a test unlike any Zolder had faced before. The peaceful rhythm of the village had grown familiar, and for the first time in his life, he found himself not just coexisting with others, but working alongside them. There was no grand battle, no immediate threat that required his strength to crush it. Instead, his days were spent in quiet labor, offering what little he could to ensure the villagers had enough food, shelter, and safety. It wasn't the kind of war he was used to, but somehow it felt like the most important battle of his life each day. Zolder's mind wrestled with the new reality he was trying to embrace. The soldiers' teachings, the elders' words, the quiet moments with the villagers, it was all slowly reshaping the warrior in him. He had started to understand the deeper meaning of strength. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about fighting for the right reasons. It was about making the world a better place, even if only one small act at a time. Yet, even as his understanding grew, doubts lingered in his mind. He had been a conqueror for so long that the weight of that past often pressed against his thoughts. Could he really change? Was he meant to protect, to help? Or was the warrior inside him destined to rise again, to reclaim the power that had always defined him? One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the village, Zolder found himself standing alone by the edge of the forest. The night air was crisp, and the stars above sparkled like the very essence of the universe itself. He inhaled deeply, savoring the coolness. But the silence left him with an unsettling feeling. The quiet, the stillness, felt foreign. It was as if the universe itself was waiting for him to make a decision. The pull of his past, the call of war, tugged at him from deep within. "Zolder," the human soldier's voice broke the silence, calm as ever. He had followed Zolder without a word, sensing the conflict that had taken root in the warrior's heart. "You're struggling, aren't you?" Zolder's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, but his voice was quiet. "I don't know what I'm meant to be anymore." The soldier stepped closer, his eyes unwavering. "You're not the same warrior you were when you arrived here, Zolder. You've changed. But that doesn't mean your past doesn't matter. It's part of who you are. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" Zolder's thoughts swirled. The question the soldier asked wasn't new. It was something he'd been grappling with for days. His past as a conqueror was not something he could simply erase. No matter how much he wanted to embrace this new path, he had been raised to believe that strength, victory, and power were everything. How could he reconcile that with what he was learning now? How could he hold on to the warrior's identity without succumbing to the darkness of conquest? "I've spent my entire life fighting to prove my strength," Zolder said, his voice tinged with frustration. "But now I'm supposed to be someone else, someone who protects, who gives. I don't know how to do that." The soldier stood in silence for a moment, considering his words. "The world isn't black and white, Zolder. No one is born a protector or a conqueror. It's about the choices you make every day, every action. You're right that your past is a part of you, but it doesn't have to define your future. You have the strength to protect, to do good. You've already shown that. You've been a part of this village's life, not as a warrior, but as a friend, as a helper. That's a start." Zolder looked at the soldier, but his thoughts were still clouded. "But I can't just ignore everything I've been. How do I move forward without forgetting who I was?" The soldier's expression softened. "You don't have to forget who you were, but you have to decide who you want to be now. What do you want to stand for, Zolder?" The question hung in the air, heavy and still. For a long time, Zolder said nothing. The battle raging inside him was far more intense than any fight he had ever faced. It wasn't about physical strength or the clashing of weapons, it was about the war within his own soul. Finally, Zolder spoke, his voice quiet, but resolute. "I want to protect. I want to fight for something that matters. I'm tired of fighting for myself." The soldier smiled, a rare expression of approval crossing his face. "That's the first step, Zolder. Now we can begin the real journey." With that, the two stood side by side, looking out at the stars. Zolder knew there was still a long road ahead of him. The struggle within wasn't over. But for the first time in his life, he felt as though he was on the right path. The path to becoming something greater than just a warrior. The path to becoming a protector. In the days that followed, Zolder's sense of purpose began to solidify. The villagers, who had once seemed so foreign to him, now felt like family. Each task he took on, from mending roofs to caring for the young and elderly, became more meaningful. It wasn't about proving himself, it was about helping those who needed it, showing that strength could be used for good. But Zolder's journey was far from complete. The war within him still raged, and there were moments when he found himself questioning his place in this world. Could he ever truly let go of the warrior within? Would the armor ever truly feel like it belonged to him? Those questions would come later. For now, Zolder knew that he had taken the first true step, and that was enough. The warrior within had not disappeared, it had simply transformed into something new. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Zolder no longer feared it. He was ready to walk it, one step at a time. Zolder stood at the edge of the village once again, watching the sun begin to dip behind the distant mountains. The colors of the sky seemed to mirror the turmoil that still stirred within him. He had come so far, yet there were moments when the weight of his past as a conqueror threatened to pull him back into the shadows. The quiet strength he had been learning to embrace felt fragile, like a delicate thread that could snap under the pressure of his old instincts. But he knew one thing for sure now: he was no longer the warrior who fought for domination. The journey to find a new purpose was just beginning. The human soldier approached him, his footsteps light on the earth, his presence calm as always. He had been by Zolder's side through every struggle, each step of the way, offering guidance, without pushing, support without judgment. But Zolder knew that the time had come for him to face the true test. "You're still thinking, aren't you?" the soldier said, his voice gentle but knowing. Zolder turned to face him, his brow furrowed. "I'm trying to understand everything. How to reconcile who I was with who I want to be. It's not easy." The soldier nodded. "It's never easy. The road you're on isn't about erasing the past, it's about learning to live with it and deciding what you want to do with it." Zolder felt the weight of those words. His past had always defined him, his victories, his battles, the bloodshed he had caused. But now, that past seemed like a distant echo, one that had been fading with each passing day. He had learned to protect, to fight for a cause greater than himself, but the scars of his old identity were still there, hidden beneath the surface. "I can't just forget what I've done," Zolder said, his voice raw. "The battles I fought, the worlds I conquered, they shaped me. How can I move forward with all that behind me?" The soldier placed a hand on Zolder's shoulder, his touch firm but understanding. "You don't have to forget, but you can choose to use those experiences differently. You can take what you've learned, the strength you've gained, and direct it towards something better. That's the difference." Zolder gazed at the horizon, his mind still racing. The pull of his past, the call of battle, the desire to prove himself, it all felt like an echo in his bones, a reminder of the warrior he used to be. But something inside him had changed. He wasn't the same being who had arrived in the village months ago. He had found a new purpose, a new sense of strength that didn't come from conquering or dominating, but from protecting, from standing with others in the face of danger, from offering a hand to those who needed it. the soldier stepped back, giving Zalther space to think. The real test is not whether you can defeat your past, but whether you can live with it and still choose to be the person you want to become. Every choice you make now, every action, will shape the future. It's not about being perfect, it's about being willing to try. Zalther nodded slowly, the weight of the soldier's words settling into his chest. He had spent so much of his life focused on power, on victory, that he had never stopped to think about the consequences of his actions. He had never truly considered what it meant to fight for something beyond himself. But now, he was learning, and it wasn't easy. "Do you think I'm ready?" Zalther asked, his voice uncertain. The soldier smiled softly, his eyes reflecting a wisdom Zalther had come to trust. No one is ever truly ready, but that's the beauty of it. You learn as you go. You don't need to have all the answers right now. What matters is that you're willing to keep moving forward. Zalther took a deep breath, his gaze steady. He could still hear the echo of the warrior within him, the call of battle, the desire to prove his strength. But now, it no longer consumed him. He had learned that true power wasn't in conquering others, it was in choosing to protect, to stand up for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, Zalther felt ready to walk it. "I'm ready," Zalther said, the words feeling more real with each passing second. "I'm ready to fight for something bigger than myself." The soldier nodded, a quiet pride in his eyes. "Then let's begin." Together, they turned toward the village, where the villagers were gathered around a fire, their faces warm with light and laughter. It wasn't a battlefield, but it was a place worth protecting. The soldiers of the past, the warriors who lived for conquest and domination, were no longer the driving force within him. The person standing beside the soldier now was someone who understood the true meaning of strength, not in the ability to destroy, but in the power to defend and to care. As Zalther stepped forward, a sense of calm washed over him. His journey was far from over, but he had found his purpose, and with each choice, each act of service, he would move closer to becoming the protector he had always meant to be. The warrior inside him had not disappeared, but he had learned to channel his strength towards something greater than himself. He had learned that true power was not in the might of the weapon, but in the will to protect and to serve. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zalther felt the weight of his old self lift, replaced by a new sense of clarity. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Zalther was no longer afraid. He had found his path, and he was ready to walk it one step at a time.